In the brutal symphony of war, where the only language spoken is the roar of gunfire and the silence of loss, sometimes a single, unexpected note can change everything. This is a story about the unseen guardian, the silent force who found her voice not through words, but through the thunderous roar of her machine. Meet it Elise Ward, a pilot known for her unwavering focus and a quiet intensity that many mistook for coldness. She flew alone, not out of arrogance, but out of a deep-seated commitment to her mission. In a valley choked with dust and death, she and her A-10 Warthog, a beast of a plane nicknamed for its rugged, unglamorous power, became a beacon of hope for a team of soldiers who were about to be overrun. This is a tale of how a woman's silent strength can become the most powerful weapon of all. The sun sank slowly behind the jagged Afghan mountains, stretching long, uneasy shadows over the dry, cracked earth. Lieutenant Ramirez crouched behind a pile of crumbling stone, the taste of grit and sweat sharp in his mouth. He dragged a dirty sleeve across his forehead, smearing dust instead of clearing it. This mission was never supposed to feel like this. The plan had been simple: slip in under cover of darkness, recover the intel, and get out before the world knew they were there. His SEAL team had done everything right. They reached the compound without tripping a single alarm, and their embedded intelligence officer had dug the encrypted files out of a steel-reinforced wall like a ghost. For a moment, it seemed like they'd pulled off a clean job. Then the valley erupted. The first shot cracked through the night, a sniper round, close enough that Ramirez swore he felt the air split. Then came the roar of gunfire from the surrounding hills, not random, but coordinated. Bullets hammered the half-collapsed mud walls around them, and the quiet desert became a killing ground. Someone had betrayed them. Pinned in a narrow wadao, the team fought to hold their ground. Each time a SEAL popped up to return fire, dirt spat into their faces from incoming rounds. Corporal Jensen took shrapnel to the leg, but he stayed in the fight, blood soaking into the parched soil beneath him. The insurgents were skilled, moving like they'd drilled this ambush a dozen times, mortar fire already bracketing closer with each shot. Ramirez's gut twisted. This wasn't a lucky guess. Someone with battlefield experience was calling the shots. A round smacked into the rock above his head, spraying stone chips across his neck. He ducked lower and yelled to his team sergeant, "Any chance that comms pack still works?" Chief Herrera tugged at the radio cables on his back, frustration written in every movement. "Negative, they're jamming us. Satellite can't get a clean line." Ramirez's jaw clenched. If the mortars got their range dialed in, they were done. He fumbled in his vest until his fingers closed around the emergency burst transmitter. Last resort. One button, one ping. Their exact coordinates sent into the void with a single message: high risk, immediate danger. For a second, he hesitated. This was the kind of signal you only sent when there was no coming back without help. Then he pressed it. Somewhere far above the valley, a satellite blinked awake and bounced the call to the nearest forward operating base. On a lonely monitor, a digital alert flashed: priority air support needed. The answer came in the form of steel and thunder. The first sign was a strange, low rumble, like thunder trapped in a canyon. Ramirez paused mid-breath. The sound grew, metal and menace layered together until it rolled over the valley. The team glanced skyward, confused. Not a chopper, not a drone. "Someone get through?" Herrera muttered, straining to hear over the whine now vibrating through the rocks. Then the sky split. A dark, broad silhouette ripped through a shaft of fading sunlight. The unmistakable shape of an A-10 Warthog. No radio chatter, no call sign, no warning, just speed and intent. The aircraft dove, and a flash of fire erupted from its nose. A heartbeat later, the signature growl of the GAU-8 Avenger cannon ripped across the valley. A mechanical roar that could be felt in the chest. Dirt erupted along the ridgeline, shredding the enemy mortar crew in seconds. Scattered figures who had owned the valley a minute ago were suddenly debris and echoes. A disbelieving laugh escaped one of the SEALs. "Holy hell!" The Warthog didn't pause. It found a pickup truck trying to escape and turned it into a rolling fireball that tumbled down the hill, exploding at the base of the valley. Still, the pilot never spoke. No ID, no confirmation, just merciless precision. Above them, Captain Elise Ward, callsign Blizzard, though some knew her as Angel 2, was part machine, part instinct. The world outside her cockpit narrowed to shapes and heat signatures. Friend and foe. Words were unnecessary. Her silence wasn't arrogance, it was focus. When she flew, she didn't just control the Warthog, she became it. Every down, every correction, every burst of fire was pure instinct, honed by years of combat. At the forward base, few even realized she'd taken the sortie. The emergency ping had come through, and Elise hadn't waited for a briefing. Helmet on, legs pumping across the tarmac, she climbed into her aircraft before the aircrew could finish strapping in the last panel. No small talk, no wasted motion. Coordinates were enough. The Warthog was ugly, old, and slow, but it was indestructible, and in her hands it was death with wings. She'd been flying combat missions for 6 years, stacking up a record of silent, surgical strikes that spoke louder than any radio call ever could. Below, Ramirez and his men began to move again, hearts hammering with a mixture of adrenaline and awe. Whoever was flying that jet had just handed them a second chance. The sky rumbled once more, and Elise Ward banked for another run. She banked sharply, letting the A-10 follow the jagged curves of the mountain terrain. The Warthog was fully armed, 1,174 rounds loaded in the 30mm Avenger cannon, laser-guided bombs ready to fall, infrared pods scanning for heat, and a full load of flares she prayed she wouldn't have to fire. This wasn't recon. This was a rescue run, and she was going in alone. The mountain winds jostled her craft, turbulence tugging at her wings, but she welcomed it. The rough air sharpened her focus. Her gloved hand adjusted the throttle, eyes scanning her instruments, then the glowing infrared feed. Tiny flickers of heat pulsed in the valley ahead, multiple signatures, too many to be random, spaced deliberately. She saw the telltale heat of weapons barrels and clusters that could only be ambush positions. These weren't disorganized guerrillas. This was a coordinated kill zone. Whoever sent that distress ping wasn't fighting amateurs. Elise Ward, callsign Blizzard Angel 2 to those who knew her, narrowed her eyes and read the land, a pass between two ridges, a scatter of mud brick compounds, wisps of smoke already curling into the sky. Near the cliffs, several heat blooms didn't move. Mortar teams. Farther west, 3 stationary vehicles idled near a squat structure, likely support trucks. But what drew her attention most were the thin trails of heat weaving through rocks and scrub. Fighters crawling into position, working their flanks. They were setting the trap, tightening the noose around her people. Not today. Her fingers danced over the targeting system, marking the mortar nests first. Then she cut the radio. No chatter, no calls for permission. These soldiers didn't need procedure. They needed her. Elise lowered the Warthog's nose and dove. Gravity pressed against her chest and helmet as the valley opened wide. She didn't flinch. Her thumb pressed the trigger, and the Avenger cannon roared to life. Tracer fire ripped into the cliffside. The mountain shuddered under the impact. Dirt, smoke, and bodies tore free in a violent spray. One nest gone. She rolled the wings, lined up the second. 3 heartbeats later, another burst tore into the ridge, flames licking skyward where the enemy had crouched seconds ago. Still no words, no acknowledgments, only action. On the ground, Lieutenant Ramirez crouched behind broken stone, eyes scanning the haze of smoke and fire. He caught the flash of sunlight on a gray fuselage and then the jagged shark mouth painted across the nose. An old predator from an old war. "Who the hell is that?" Chief Herrera muttered beside him. Ramirez didn't take his eyes off the sky. "No idea. But whoever it is, they're buying us time." Up in the cockpit, Elise breathed evenly, letting the Warthog's hum settle into her bones. On her HUD, one of the enemy trucks was creeping backward, trying to tuck behind the buildings. She rolled into position, released a single guided bomb, and watched it vanish beneath her wing. Silent, precise, and final. The truck erupted in a controlled bloom of fire without damaging the structures. She climbed, scanned, dipped. Another flicker on infrared. A sniper team shifting near a small comms mast. She flipped back to the Avenger. A short burst, gone. No confirmation needed. Her world was the sky, the heat signatures, and the lives below that counted on her to see everything. The sun dipped lower, stretching shadows across the valley. Smoke and fire streaked the battlefield like a grim painting. Elise felt no awe in it, only the weight of the unfinished. Her fuel was half. Ammunition still good. But she knew the second she left, the team below could be swallowed again. She stayed. Below, the SEALs advanced through the wreckage, moving carefully now, but no longer desperate. Every time an enemy form appeared in Ramirez's scope, it fell before he could even squeeze the trigger. Cut down by the angel above. Herrera stared skyward, hearing the low, guttural growl of the Warthog and the savage punctuation of its cannon. "She's not even talking to us," he said, voice tight with awe. "She's just watching, like she sees everything. Feels like she's already a step ahead," Ramirez muttered, ducking into cover. Elise circled tight, keeping the SEALs and the high ridges in her sight. The A-10 wasn't the fastest jet in the fleet, but that was never its strength. It lingered. It prowled. It killed slow and close, and she loved it for that. Other aircraft screamed by and vanished into the clouds. She stayed in the storm. She flipped the targeting pod to thermal. West Ridge, movement near a natural rock bridge. Fighters creeping to the SEAL 6, aiming to cut off their retreat. Elise didn't hesitate. She banked hard, the force crushing against her ribs, and slipped into a shallow dive. The engines were behind her. The mountain would muffle the sound. No one below would hear her coming. The Warthog emerged from the sky like judgment itself, one squeeze of the trigger. The Avenger roared, the rock bridge disintegrated, tumbling down in a cloud of dust and stone, burying the fighters beneath it. On the ground, Ramirez and Herrera whipped their heads toward the blast. The path they'd hoped to retreat through was gone, but so were the reinforcements. "Angel 2, this is Phoenix Actual," Ramirez tried again, keying his mic out of reflex. "Do you copy?" Only static. In her cockpit, Elise heard the radio hiss and crackle. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Talking meant distraction. Reassurance cost seconds. Seconds got people killed. Her actions would speak. The Warthog banked overhead once more, casting a long shadow over the valley. Below, the SEALs pressed forward, moving with the steady confidence of soldiers who knew an unseen guardian had claimed the sky. The ground they had lost hours ago was theirs again. They could almost sense the aircraft moving as if it were part of their team, a silent guardian that shifted and reacted to threats before they even knew they were there. In the village beyond the compound walls, the sudden roar of a truck-mounted machine gun shattered the tense quiet. Bullets clanged and sparked off stone, sending shards and dust exploding around Lieutenant Ramirez's boots. He dove, rolling behind a rusted water tank for cover, and barked into the comms, "Heavy gun, north side." Before his team could return fire, the distant wail of an A-10 cut through the sky. Elise Ward, Blizzard, Angel 2 to those who depended on her but had never met her, had already seen the flash of gunfire and begun her descent. Calm and precise, she lined up her sights. The gunner never even turned his head. A ripping roar filled the valley as the cannon tore the vehicle to pieces. Shards of metal flew like leaves in a storm. Fire erupted, and a black column of smoke painted the sky as Elise climbed again. Ramirez stared up for a beat, shaking his head. "She's unreal." Chief Herrera crouched beside him, a low chuckle in his chest. "I don't think she even blinked." A minute dragged by. The hills fell silent. No more muzzle flashes, no mortar whistles. The battlefield exhaled, and the SEAL team regrouped near their objective. They had the data drive. The main hostile force was gone. A mission that should have ended in a body count now looked like a clean extraction, all thanks to someone they had never seen and couldn't speak to. In her cockpit, Elise inhaled through the oxygen mask, tasting filtered dust and dry heat. Her gut confirmed what her sensors told her. The enemy had broken. Survivors were scattering for the mountains. The immediate danger was gone, at least for now. She flicked her eyes to the fuel gauge, low but not critical. She couldn't stay much longer without risking a powerless glide back to base. Her gloved finger tapped across the control panel, scanning for any emergency refuel sites. None close. She would have to leave soon. Then something blinked on the edge of her infrared feed. 3 heat signatures, moving fast downhill from the eastern ridge. Too coordinated to be retreating. heading straight for the team's only viable exit and likely carrying RPGs. Elise turned the Warthog without hesitation. On the ground, Ramirez felt it. The air shifted, the roar returned, deliberate and heavy, not random, protective. He knew without seeing that their unseen guardian was watching over their escape. A second later, the A-10 swept down. Elise fired 3 disciplined cannon bursts, 1, 2, 3. 3 flashes of impact, 3 threats gone. Silence again, broken only by the faint hiss of settling dust. Ramirez gave the hand signal to move. The SEALs slipped through the shattered compound like flowing water, clearing alleys and rooms with lethal efficiency. Still no voice from the mysterious pilot, but her presence was everywhere. Her timing wasn't luck, it was surgical. Every shift of their path matched her shadow. When they paused, she circled. When they advanced, she cleared the way. A rhythm formed, unspoken, unbreakable, between the ground and the sky. Elise's next pass hugged the rooftops, barely 200 feet above them. Turbulence rattled the Warthog, but she corrected automatically, eyes locked on infrared. A new enemy squad emerged from a hidden trench along the north slope. 6 men, crouched and ready, moving toward the compound's eastern edge. If the SEALs exited here, they'd walk straight into an ambush. She nosed into a dive. Elise never wasted ammo. Every burst had to matter. A half-second of fire split the trench apart. Sandbags, bodies, and rifles scattered skyward, then fell into stillness. 2 survivors bolted for the ridge. She curved behind them, quiet and merciless, and ended the threat. Down below, Ramirez watched her pass again, admiration cutting through the adrenaline. "She's not just helping us," he muttered. "She's clearing the whole valley." Herrera scanned the slopes and nodded slowly. "It's like she's 10 steps ahead. I've never seen anything like it." They reached the final checkpoint, a crumbling stable overlooking the western path to extraction. The way out was clear, but none of them eased up. Elise's presence was a reminder. If she was still circling, danger was close. Half a mile ahead, hidden among boulders, insurgents were readying a technical truck. A heavy belt-fed machine gun gleamed in the back. One fighter adjusted the mount, another swept the road with the binoculars. They had no idea death was already above them. Elise caught them in her scope. She throttled down, selected a precision-guided rocket, and locked the target. The explosion was brutal and sudden, folding the truck inward like a crushed soda can. The gunner never made a sound. Fire flared, then faded, leaving the road dark and empty again. The SEALs heard the blast and turned toward the faint glow. Ramirez exhaled, tension bleeding out for a second. "She's watching our exit." One of the men grinned. "At this rate, we won't even need to shoot." He spoke too soon. From the left flank, 2 insurgents erupted from the ruins, AKs spitting fire. Stone shards sliced the air. Collins spun, firing back, dropping one before diving for cover. The other took aim at Herrera, then disappeared in a cloud of pulverized rock. Elise had seen the muzzle glint and responded before thought could catch up. A short burst of fire erased the threat. Herrera looked skyward. "Thank you," he said softly. She couldn't hear him, but Elise felt it all the same. Gratitude didn't need to be spoken. It lived in the fact that none of them were bleeding out on the rocks below. That was enough. Her eyes flicked to the fuel gauge, below 20%. She couldn't stay airborne much longer without risking an emergency landing deep in hostile territory. And yet she hesitated. The SEALs were on the move now, careful and fast, ghosting toward their extraction. She watched them reach the rusted bus marking the final checkpoint. They scanned the hills, covering each other, trusting no silence. Elise tapped her display, sweeping one last scan of the valley. She spotted them. 2 enemy fighters crouched in the shadows of a half-collapsed building, RPGs balanced on their shoulders, eyes locked on the empty stretch of road where the SEAL team would appear next. They were patient, too patient, holding their fire for the perfect moment, maybe for one last desperate chance. Elise didn't give them that chance. She squeezed the trigger, sending short, precise bursts into each shattered window. The men were lifted out of the building as if yanked by invisible strings, gone before they even knew death had come for them. Smoke trailed faintly behind her Warthog as she climbed again. Not because she'd taken damage, but because her overworked engines were running hot, pushed to their limit. Below, she checked the road one last time. The SEALs were moving, slipping past the danger. The final threat was gone. Elise let out a steady breath and banked east toward the pale horizon. No flares, no cheers, no triumphant music. Just a silent withdrawal into the fading sky. The extraction point lay only a ridge and a few uneven lines of rock away, but the SEALs didn't relax. Their boots scraped against loose stone, rifles sweeping every angle, eyes behind scopes alert and unblinking. They knew they'd made it this far because of an unseen guardian circling above. But experience told them the last enemy was often the one that killed you. Lieutenant Ramirez took the lead, crouching to study the narrow route ahead. The valley choked down into a flat clearing beside a dried riverbed, the only spot level enough for a helicopter to land. That also made it predictable, a natural kill box if anyone was still lying in wait. Chief Herrera's voice came low. Hawk reports a signal clean. Bird inbound, 8 minutes. Ramirez nodded. Plenty of time to get shot, he muttered, dry as sand. Then the ground gave a faint shiver. Not an explosion, just a low, thrumming vibration that settled in their boots. Moments later, the roar reached them. The Warthog. They tilted their heads skyward as the aircraft swept across the valley like a hawk in a hunting dive, wings wide and steady. It didn't fire, didn't drop ordnance, just flew low, circling once like it was reading the land for danger. Inside the cockpit, Elise said nothing. She didn't need to. Her eyes flicked from screen to screen, from ridge to ravine, meaning the SEALs were moving with precision, but their path out had shifted. She had to widen her sweep to be the shadow between life and death. She leaned into the controls, switching to infrared, toggling through zoom levels until faint heat signatures bled across the screen. 3 shapes sprinting along the far tree line, low and cold, their body heat muted under foliage. Elise knew exactly what they were planning. They'd wait for the helicopter to settle into its landing, then fire at the tail rotor or engine to cripple it, pinning the SEALs in place for an easy kill. It was an old trick, but in a narrow valley like this, it could work unless someone stopped them. She would. Elise banked hard, cutting her engines to a whisper as she dropped behind a ridge. The fighters crouched lower in the brush, oblivious, convinced they'd gone unseen. They never realized the danger was coming from behind. One burst from her Avenger cannon tore through the tree line, shredding branches and flesh alike. The 3 figures didn't even scream. They simply ceased. Her rounds tore up the earth just shy of the helicopter's landing path, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. Back on the ground, Ramirez caught a glimpse of smoke curling at the edge of the zone. She's still up there, he muttered, mostly to himself. Herrera crouched beside him, eyes on the horizon. 3 minutes to bird. Then we're gone. Daniels, the youngest in the unit, glanced skyward. Think she'll stick around till we're clear? Ramirez's mouth curved into the faintest smirk. I think she'll be here long after we're gone. In the cockpit, Elise felt the drag worsening. A fuel warning light blinked insistently. She checked the gauge, under 15%. She was running out of choices: limp home to base on fumes, or put the Warthog down at some remote outpost and wait for a tow. Neither option was appealing, but the mission wasn't over. Not until the team was airborne. Her instincts tugged at her, restless. One more pocket she hadn't swept. An old irrigation trench, just close enough for an RPG shot at the landing zone. Something felt wrong there. She made a first pass. Nothing. A second pass, slower. Her targeting pod blinked. Heat. 2 fighters dug in, launchers poised. She dropped a string of flares, drawing their eyes for a fatal instant, then rolled the Warthog sideways and opened fire. The trench imploded in a cloud of dirt and splintered wood. When the dust settled, the world was quiet again. Elise finally exhaled. On the valley floor, the rhythmic chop of rotor blades grew louder. The extraction chopper swept in low, its downwash whipping dirt into violent spirals. A single wave from the cockpit signaled the all clear. Ramirez led the team aboard. They moved fast, but not recklessly. Every man alive, every rifle intact. As the helicopter rose, Ramirez looked back at the smoking battlefield, then up, just in time to see the Warthog drift past overhead. Not close, not dramatic, just present, watching. Herrera leaned toward him. We should give it a call sign. Ramirez shook his head. She didn't give us one. Then what do we call her? He watched the silhouette of the Warthog fade into the amber haze of sunset. The reason we're still breathing. The helicopter climbed steadily into the smoke-streaked sky, rotor slicing through the shimmering heat left by the fight that almost was. Inside, the SEALs sat in silence, each one replaying the moments they should have died but didn't. It wasn't luck. It was her. Herrera stared out the window at the shrinking aircraft. Never heard her voice, he said softly. Ramirez nodded. Didn't need to. She said enough. Far above and fading east, Elise pushed the Warthog harder, her fuel dipping into the red. She had worked the old bird until the bolts rattled in protest, but she felt no regret. Every shot had mattered. Every pass had kept them alive. She switched to energy conservation, scanning the map. Returning to base was a gamble now. Outpost Kilo 5, a dirt strip with a few tents and fuel drums, was barely within reach. It would have to do. The autopilot chimed a mild altitude warning. She ignored it. One last look at the valley. Clear, still, dead. Her job was done. Yet deep inside, her instincts whispered that the fight was never truly over. The transport climbed steadily toward the outer edge of the airspace, leaving the chaos behind. No hostile signals followed. No heat signatures in pursuit. For a brief moment, the sky was clear, quiet, almost serene. Then she saw it. A lone vehicle sat wedged between two low hills near the mouth of a cave, half lost in the dust and stone. It was too far from the earlier engagement zone to have played any part in the ambush. Its engine was cold, no movement around it. Still, something about the sight clawed at Elise Ward's instincts, that quiet alarm in the back of a combat pilot's mind that never quite stops whispering. Why would a technical just sit out here, all by itself, nowhere near the fight? She glanced down again, suspicion digging in deeper. Her thumb flipped the sensor switch from infrared to electromagnetic. The screen shimmered faintly, metal glinting where it had no right to be, carefully concealed under a patchwork of camouflage netting and rock-colored tarp. Then she saw the pulse, a shortwave transmitter sending quiet, steady bursts into the air. This wasn't a stranded fighter or a survivor waiting for pickup. This was a spotter, a late-stage response team, maybe even a high-value target, a foreign-trained cell leader coordinating strikes and feeding coordinates to someone miles away. And they were still breathing. Elise's eyes flicked to the fuel gauge. The needle buried itself deep in the red. Every reasonable pilot would have turned for home. Even the manual would have agreed, disengage, conserve fuel, live to fight the next round. No one back at the base would have blamed her for heading straight to Kilo 5 to land. But Elise Ward wasn't built for reasonable. She banked hard. The Warthog's engines groaned as she pushed it back toward the hills, the nose tilting toward that cave like a hunting animal scenting blood. Down below, the world remained ignorant until the ground itself began to tremble under the roar of her dive. A man in dark tactical gear exploded out of the camouflage cave, headset pressed to his mouth, screaming into the mic, pointing skyward. A second man stumbled toward the truck bed, wrestling with a metal case of equipment. Neither made it more than a few desperate steps. The Warthog spat a single precision bomb that punched the earth with surgical finality. Elise followed it immediately with a strafing run, the GAU-8 cannon thundering like a god's heartbeat. Rock and sand erupted. The cave mouth collapsed in on itself. The vehicle burst into an angry bloom of fire, dry grass catching like tinder as shrapnel turned the air into a storm of molten metal. Then silence swallowed the hills. Elise pulled up sharply, the engines protesting as she forced the nose toward the open sky. Miles away at Outpost Kilo 5, a weary crew chief leaned against a refueling truck, eyes on the horizon. A younger technician muttered, "She's not gonna make it back." The chief didn't even blink. "She will. That bird always comes home." Minutes later, a black shape crept over the ridge, low, limping, but alive. The A-10 bled speed as it descended, every mechanical bone in its frame groaning with the effort. Elise coaxed it gently toward the dirt runway, shallow and deliberate to avoid a stall. The ground rushed up, tires slammed hard, dirt exploding in a brown cloud behind her. The warthog bounced once, shuddered, then clung to the earth with a long, squealing sigh. It rolled to a stop with barely a dozen feet to spare. Engines cut. Silence returned. Ground crew sprinted forward, dragging fuel lines and braces. Elise popped the canopy, yanked off her helmet. Her flight suit clung to her in a layer of sweat, eyes ringed with exhaustion. But her expression was flat and unreadable. She climbed down, boots crunching on the gravel, and walked straight past the crew. A young mechanic called after her. "Did you get him?" She paused just for a beat, turned halfway. "All of them," she said, voice level as stone. Then she disappeared into the operations tent and alone. Back at the main base, the SEAL team had returned, still shaking the desert dust from their gear. Briefings had already begun. The commanding officer paced outside the intel room, waiting for confirmed enemy losses. Lieutenant Ramirez arrived carrying the secured hard drive. Text tore into it immediately, fingers flying over keyboards. Minutes later, the CO stepped out with only one question. "Who was your air support?" Ramirez glanced toward the ceiling like he could see her warthog through the metal roof. "Angel 2, he said. "That's all we were told." The officer frowned. "No Angel 2 appears in today's flight dispatch. Closest A-10 was 20 minutes out." "Then someone bent time," Herrera muttered from the corner. The officer's gaze swept the room, skeptical and impressed in equal measure. Whoever it was just took out 4 positions, destroyed the technicals, stopped an RPG ambush, and flattened a command node hidden in a cave. Solo. No backup, no comms. Ramirez just nodded, lips pressed tight. The next morning, the desert sun glared over Kilo 5. Dust coated every rivet of the Warthog's frame, the engine cover still radiating warmth from the punishing dive. Elise sat on a folding chair by the hangar. Boots scuffed and dusty, hair pulled into a tight knot, a cup of coffee cooling in her hand, untouched. Her flight log rested under her arm, blank signature, line waiting. The crew chief approached carefully. "Command sent a chopper. They want a full debrief." She nodded. "How long?" 20 minutes. She said nothing more. Her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. Inside the command tent, the forward ops team pieced together the battle from every angle. Drone captures, helmet cams, satellite scans. They replayed the ghost of her attack over and over. One analyst leaned back in disbelief. She did the work of an entire air wing, alone. Do we even know who she is? Another shook his head. Flew under a temporary call sign, Angel 2. No filed plan, no audio traffic, just target confirmation and response. Then gone. You think she disobeyed orders? No, the man said after a moment. I think she didn't wait for them. At the SEALs rec room, the team sprawled across benches, half bandaged, half laughing now that the adrenaline had burned out. Daniels replayed a silent clip of the Warthog screaming across a helmet cam feed, fire tracing its path through the mountains. "She flew right over us," he said, "so low I could have touched the landing gear." Ramirez tossed a stress ball at him. "Yeah, and you were curled behind a boulder screaming. Remember that?" Daniels laughed, tension breaking like a snapped wire. Herrera said quietly, "We need to put her name in the report." Ramirez nodded. "We do, but nobody knows it." The youngest SEAL fished out a pen, scrawled on the back of a mission folder, and held it up. Elise, A-10, and A-2, he underlined it twice. When the chopper arrived at Kilo 5, Elise rose from her chair, handed her flight log to the crew chief. "If anyone asks where I went," the chief grinned, "I'll tell them I never saw you." As the helicopter lifted off, Elise glanced down at the Warthog, the aircraft that had carried her through fire and fury without complaint. Soon, someone else might sit in that cockpit. They would fly it. They might even fight in it, but they would never fly it like she did. At the main base, the commanding officer was waiting when she stepped off the chopper. Elise gave a single nod and walked straight into the darkened debrief room. The projector froze on a still frame of drone footage, smoke curling from the cane where the command node had once been. A row of officers sat along the wall, expressions cold and clipped. "Lieutenant Captain Elise Monroe," the senior officer said at last. "You're aware you exceeded your mission parameters yesterday?" Her voice was calm. "I am." "You responded Lieutenant Ramirez sat in the briefing room, hands folded, his jaw tight. Across from him, Chief Herrera studied the report like it was a live grenade, while Corporal Jensen leaned silently against the wall. Elise Ward, callsign Blizzard, though most in the field whispered Angel 2, stood at attention, her posture unflinching, her face unreadable. Collins and Daniels occupied seats near the far end of the table, silent observers to a scene that felt more like a trial than a debriefing. "You responded to a mission you weren't assigned," Herrera said finally, his voice calm but sharp. "You engaged in an unsanctioned strike using live ammunition. You emptied the Warthog's cannon in a civilian classified zone." "I did," Elise said without hesitation. Herrera paused, tapping the folder's edge with one finger. "You also eliminated 4 confirmed insurgent targets, destroyed their vehicles, stopped an RPG ambush, and neutralized a mobile command center." "Correct?" "Correct." A younger officer leaned forward, incredulous. "Why didn't you report in?" "There wasn't time," Elise replied evenly. "The seals were pinned. I had eyes on the target. I acted." The room went still. The air smelled of coffee and hot electronics, but beneath it all was tension, the kind that carried weight. Finally, the commanding officer leaned back, folding his arms. 15 sorties in 30 days, he said. 12 confirmed hits. You've pushed that bird to the edge of collapse, and through all of it, not a single civilian casualty. You're not reckless, Monroe. He glanced at the folder again, as though weighing the truth. But you're not standard either. Elise said nothing. "You'll get no commendation for this," Herrera added. "I don't want one. There won't be a public record. There never is." He opened the folder and slid a single sheet across the table. Deployment orders, no fanfare, no medal, just coordinates and a time. Elise signed without reading, then left the room. In the corridor, an intelligence analyst jogged to catch up. "Hey," he called. He held a tablet, face bright with restrained excitement. "We pulled final data from your last run. You took out a Tier 1 target hiding in that canyon. We've been hunting him for a year." Elise paused mid-stride, her voice quiet. He picked the wrong canyon. The analyst had stared at her, almost awed. "You're kind of a ghost. You know that? No radio chatter, no mistakes, no trail." She allowed the faintest smirk. "That's how the Warthog flies." Outside on the tarmac, the wind lifted the scent of jet fuel and scorched sand. The sun glinted off distant hangars as Elise stood for a long, solitary moment. Another mission would come, but for now, the sky was still. Days passed. Her name never reached the headlines. The mission disappeared into classified archives. There was no hero's welcome, no medal, no patch on her sleeve. But in the circles that mattered, whispers traveled quietly. At the SEAL base, a new recruit asked, "So, who's this Angel 2 I keep hearing about?" Herrera didn't answer right away. He passed a mug of coffee to Ramirez and finally said, "She's the one who shows up when nobody else can." The recruit frowned. "But what squadron is she with?" Ramirez smiled faintly. "She's not really with anyone." Far away, buried in a mountain bunker, analysts finalized a top-secret report. It logged precision strikes, minimized collateral damage, and an unprecedented survival rate for ground teams. The final line read, "So I had an untraceable A-10 pilot, extreme tactical efficiency, silent commendation recommended." In red ink beneath it, someone had scrawled, "She doesn't speak, but her cannon does." By then, Elise was already airborne again. A different mission, different terrain. Her repaired Warthog purred with a deeper hum, its cannon freshly serviced, hard points lined with armor-piercing payloads. No step-by-step orders, just a time, a grid, and a call sign. She preferred it that way. Below her, the jungle teemed with insurgent movement. An allied team was cornered, communications jammed, no eyes in the sky. Then the low thunder of the Warthog rolled in. Elise dropped altitude, not for show, but for precision. Her cannon tore through the canopy, splintering trees, clearing paths. The trapped soldiers emerged alive, never seeing her face, but one of them glanced upward and whispered, "That had to be her." Back at a remote strip, Elise landed without ceremony. The ground crew waited, but she killed the engines and sat in the cockpit, hand resting on the throttle, eyes on the empty sky. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. A secure radio frequency crackled. Angel 2, this is Ghost Tower. Job's clean. Path clear. She clicked once in acknowledgement. No words, just a ping, enough. Later, crossing the dim airfield toward her quarters, a young pilot stopped her. His wings were fresh, his uniform still stiff. Ma'am, are you really Angel 2? Elise didn't slow. That day in the mountains, he said, voice tinged with awe. Was that you up there? She paused. I go where I'm needed. That's it. The pilot hesitated, but Elise vanished into the shadows. In her quarters, she unzipped her gear bag and pulled out a crumpled note. A message slipped into her cockpit before that canyon run. If we make it, we owe you a drink. If we don't, you were the last angel we ever saw. She folded it carefully and tucked it beneath her helmet. The words stayed with her longer than the echo of her cannon fire. Months passed and unofficial stories spread like wildfire. Soldiers swore they saw a silent A-10 when hope was gone. Missions logged precision strikes without any listed air support. Satellite images showed only smoke trails and shifting shadows. Always the same call sign, Angel 2. Some dismissed it as myth. The SEALs knew better. At a quiet reunion, Ramirez raised a glass to his team. Not all heroes wear patches, he said. Some don't even tell you their names. But you know they were there because you made it home. They toasted in silence. Far away, over a dawn-lit coastline, Elise made one last pass in her Warthog. The sea shimmered below. Clouds broke under the sun. A message flashed across her console. Mission complete. Return at will. She keyed a simple response. Targets clear. Ground safe. No follow-up. Then she climbed into the morning sky, the Warthog disappearing into the blue. There would be no announcement, no record. But when the next call came and another team was trapped with nowhere to run, a voice would whisper the same words again. Call Angel 2, and she would come.